So I decided I'd bring you a starting question first before we pop into the topic. So this one's been on my mind, thinking back over the last year and what I have read. So I have a question about anything that you read, and it doesn't have to be a specific book. It can just be like in general, in within a genre, or something that, whatever that influenced or affected you as a writer and or a reader last year.
Oh, wow. Great question. Oh my gosh. Way to hit me with a stumper right at the top of the call.
Well, and I can give you
Anything?
my answer if that would help.
Sure. Yeah, you go first.
So I'm
And
doing homeschool
Kristen
with
and
my kids,
Paulette,
so
if you've got a book in mind, pop it in the chat for us too. We'll ask everybody this.
absolutely. And
Okay,
I ended
Catherine,
up
you're up.
with a bunch of she's in second grade, so a bunch of these older kids books, and I just love reading them. All the chapters are like vignettes and just these adventures, and so that influenced the way that I think about story and how it's told and how kids interpret story, and it was a very fun thing to do. And there was about 6 or 7 books that I've read that have done that. So that's my answer.
Mm, nice. Good
Older
answer.
children's books.
Yeah, yeah. That is a good answer. Um, I don't, this maybe didn't influence me craft wise, but in terms of process and thinking about myself as a writer, as a literary artist, and where I'm at in my life, you know, getting getting older and thinking about what I've accomplished and what I want to accomplish still. Art Above Everything by Stephanie Elizondo
Hmm.
Grized. We read that because she was coming on the podcast. So that book, I think, definitely gave me reason to reflect further and deeper about myself as a writer and thinking,
Hmm.
you know, back 20, 30 years, what were my ambitions when I was a 20 something writer? And what are they now as a 50 plus writer? What's happened in between? How happy am I with what I've done, where I've gotten? Am I too hard on myself? Could I be more focused or more oriented toward my writing goals, especially, you hit that stage of life where the nest is empty. I think we go through life and we think, well, when my kid is in school, I'm going to write more. Well, when my kid is out of the house, I'm going to write more. When this job does that, I'm going to write more and I'll focus on my creative life and myself as an artist.
Hmm.
But at the end of the day, it always comes back to what is our priority? What is our motivation? And how much are we willing to give to that priority? Because it does demand a lot of ourselves,
Hmm.
you know? Yeah, I think
True.
it's mental, emotional, and spiritual energy. They're all required to be any kind of a creative artist. So,
Absolutely. Sorry, I have to like
all
lay
right.
down.
Kristen says, I write book reviews, and I just today wrote a review of an upcoming essay collection called Residual by Tisa Bryant. It's a collection of hybrid experimental essays about dealing with her mother's death. The fragmentary style absolutely worked to capture her complicated feelings. Yeah, yeah. And does it inspire you to attempt that fragmentary style of writing or subject matter, that kind of emotionally intense subject matter, like the death of someone close to you? Um, yeah, I think a lot of our inspirational input, sometimes it's very craft focused and sometimes it's more process or, personal oriented,
Hmm.
maybe. Yeah.
Well, and that's what
Yes.
we always
Thank you,
talk about,
Kristen.
being a reader first, right? Because that reading does influence you're creating so much. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Maybe.
Definitely.
Awesome. Okay. I was going to follow that up with, is there anything you're looking forward to reading, whether a specific book or a general thing that you want to ambitionary reading for this coming year?
Mm. Um, I always think I'm going to read more literature that challenges and inspires me, and then I get busy reading the stuff I have to read for work, for the podcast, research for my writing, the nonfiction or even fiction. Since I've been writing, Playing with the Wind, I've been reading books written in,
Hmm.
the 20s specifically, or going into that period, which is always fun. I just found a used book at a bookstore that was published in 1935. Um, and I like finding antique and vintage books by female authors because we often don't hear of them, unless you go back to
Mm.
like Edith Wharton or some of those really famous writers. And of course, there are some famous contemporary women writers we could all name. But, this book I found, I opened the cover and her other books by this woman, she's got like 15 or 20 of them listed in the front matter. And I'm like, okay, well, I've never heard of you, but now I'm going to read this
Hmm.
book, and I expect it to be kind of fun, more genre fiction than literary fiction, kind of a mystery or thriller type story. So I'm very curious to see what a woman publishing in 1935 wrote like,
Mm.
especially in those categories. I think that'll be fun.
Yeah, definitely. It's always good to
Hmm.
expand what you have on your shelf.
Yes, even if nobody's ever heard of the author or the book.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome.
Hmm.
Okay. Well, if anyone else wants to comment, jump on in, but I'm going to go ahead and introduce kind of the main topic for the video, but or for the live. But you guys jump in with whatever, and we'll answer it. So, okay, I wanted to talk a
Yeah,
little bit.
and
Yeah.
Kristen did share another comment. I know
Oh,
there's lag time,
man,
right?
mine
We
is
have to wait
not
for typing and things to
rolling.
come up. Yeah, I agree, Kristen. I think the essay gives us so many options for form, because it's short, because it's personal, because there are a lot of styles available out there. And taking different approaches like that can be a really great way to get into our challenging subject matter. Yeah.
Hmm.
Thank you. Thanks for joining the conversation. I love that.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm moving on.
All right. Yep.
I need to watch that chat thing like it doesn't scroll automatically. I have to like push a button. So I apologize if I miss you guys. Oh, and then it scrolled automatically right there.
Yes.
So I'll try to keep a closer eye on when it hands me an arrow. Um, okay, I want to talk a little bit about point of view because I've been noticing some trends in recent books that I've read, and I wanted to kind of dive in a little bit to some of those things, and maybe you can answer some crafty type how to's with some of that. So, firstly, I guess there's an increasing trend in using first person point of views. So, could you just give us a quick? I know most people probably know this, but definition of first versus third, and kind of why you think maybe people are leaning into that first person.
Hmm. Yeah. So third person point of view is using third person pronouns, he, she. Um, and if we're in a close third, which is far more common than a middle or distant third, the narrator, the typically invisible authorial narrator, right? It's like you're sitting on that character's shoulder. You do get the interiority of a first person when the narrator chooses to enter that character's head space, right? And you see the world as in that very close position with the point of view character, but then this authorial narrator can also step into a more impersonal type of exposition and can do more of an expansive worldview and even share things that the point of view character could not know in that moment. If you want to let the reader know that there's somebody approaching the front door before the protagonist knows that, you could do that. You set up your own framework in terms of that narrative point of view lens and how much scope that narrator has. And then you get to expand and contract within the framework that you set up for yourself, right? With
Mhm.
a first person narrator, you have a lot less distance to work with because your point of view character is also your narrator. And so we are always inside that character's head. We only have interiority. Now, not every character is qualified to be a narrator. So when an author is choosing a first person narrator, you've got to make sure you're developing a character who is robust enough to do the work of a narrator, right? And so your narrator might describe something happening outside the moment in the scene, but it has to be within the knowledge bank of that character. So then you're asking yourself, what is my temporal distance, my chronological distance between point of view character and point of view character as narrator? If it's immediate, and I know there's a trend, especially in certain genres, to do first person present tense, then you really shouldn't be showing us anything outside of this character's awareness in that moment. But if this character has some time, and the more time, the more growth, the more maturity, the more emotional distance the character has from the events, right? The narrator has from the character in the moment. So you might have a character narrator who says, while I was cooking dinner, Joe was approaching my house. Little did I know, and can fill in things she would have learned over time, right? With
Mhm.
information she would have gained after that moment in the story. So you've got a little more room to breathe with the narrative scope, with the first person narrator when you establish some of that chronology. In Saving Annabelle, I have a first person narrator, Greta, and she tells us a little bit of backstory about her parents. And she says in her exposition as the narrator, some things I know because I've heard the stories. My parents have talked about this. Other things, I think I just know them because they're woven into your DNA. She doesn't use that language, but that's the gist of it, right? So you establish with your reader an agreement. This is who my narrator is. This is what she knows. This is how she knows it. And so, as long as you do that well, the reader should go along for the ride, right? Without objecting.
Definitely. Do you think that it's shifting? Because I know, like, if you read literature from 100 years ago, you get a lot more omniscient third person style narratives. And then, there was a lot of just third person limited up until I don't even know when this started shifting, but now it feels like it's much more common to pick up a book and have it be in first person. Do you think there is kind of like a cultural shift going on with the way books are written? And maybe it's genre
Um,
specific, maybe it's not, but I feel like even things outside of maybe like your young adult fiction is starting to move into that first person.
right. So I think some of it we could assume is just cultural trends. It's what people are interested in exploring. They like the idea of the first person narrator. Readers are very used to it and go with it easily. And so that's neither good nor bad. It just is. I think there's also a piece of it that we can put down to people tend to write what they read. And so if they're
Mm,
coming up as writers and they're reading lots and lots of first person stories, that's going to be the most natural for them to write. And that's fine unless you're limiting yourself creatively and maybe you aren't even aware that you're limiting yourself. Maybe you don't think to go experiment and try this story in a different voice and see if it might be more powerful an experience for your characters, for your reader. And then, I think there can be some fallout from that in a larger sense, where like if people aren't reading widely, if they aren't being trained in different types of narrative possibilities, and if they aren't going and exploring for themselves, then I think the world of literature could contract
Mm,
as a result. So, is it just a trend? Is it positive? Is it negative? Is it neutral? I don't know, but I do think all of those things could be at play.
hmm
And I see a
Definitely.
comment.
Yeah,
Do you want
Kristen says unreliable narrator is much more common too, along with the occasional second person. Yes,
to?
I have
Hmm.
noticed that.
Yeah.
I think, okay, are you seeing unreliable narrator in first person though? Because that would be really difficult, I feel, because you're in the head of the character, unless they themselves are deceived, which is an interest. Okay, now you've got me in experimental mode.
Well, I'm reading books written in the 1920s and 30s right now, but
Yeah.
I think a great example of that is Dennis Lehane's Shutter Island.
hmm
So, unreliable narrators, and then what's the Gone Girl or Girl Gone or something was
Gone
one that
Girl,
came
yeah.
out not too long ago that made a big splash. You know, it's fun to experiment and play, but when you do, you just, again, you're setting up the rules for yourself. And if you do it well, people will appreciate it and go along with it, enjoy your story. So why do you have an unreliable narrator? What is that narrator trying to accomplish? And is the narrator telling the story to the reader, or are you establishing within the story a different audience? And then the reader is sort of that fly on the wall type of audience. So you might have an unreliable narrator whose audience is a loved one, a spouse or a child, someone you're either trying to deceive or protect,
hmm
right? And then you've got to figure out, how do I clue the reader into the fact that this narrator is deceptive? Or, is the narrator lying or incapable of seeing the truth for
hmm
himself, like in Shutter Island, right? Where we've
Right.
got, yeah. So it's all fun. It's all fun and games. I think that the challenge as a writer is to know why you're doing it yourself. Like, why am I making this choice? Is it because it's a fun challenge for me creatively, or is it because I think it's what the marketplace wants,
Mm,
right?
yeah. And you talk a lot about, does the story demand it? And it's like,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah, it's
the
all about
Gone
the
Girl.
story.
Yep. Gone Girl in some books by Herman. Is it Koch or I don't know. Sorry, I probably messed that up also. I love reading them. They'd be tricky to write. Yes. I do think that's a know your skill level, know your ability, and play with it, but maybe not something you'd want to do in long form. This is why short form fiction is so fun. You can give it a go and
Yes. Yes, definitely. Hmm.
awesome. All right. The other thing I want to talk about was multiple point of view because I read a really fantastic book, and I'm going to mess up the author's name because I don't have it in front of me, but it was called The Warbler. It was a Kindle first read a couple of months ago, and so I just decided to pick it up. And it was in first person, and then it had multiple point of views where it went back in time through the generations of women, and they were all, I believe, also in first person. And she labeled it really well, but I feel like I'm starting to see more authors willing to have multiple point of views in first person. You talk a little bit about the pitfalls of that and where they might have to be really careful and or, the skill set of deciding to do that in first person.
Yeah. Yep. So, uh, so with multiple thirds, let's start there. With multiple third person point of view characters, you've got the invisible authorial narrator, creating continuity of narrative voice,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the style of the book as a whole, what the narrative voice feels like, the tone, the mood it creates, all of those elements are down to you, the author, right? You adopt the voice the story demands. So it's your voice, but it's your voice modified and tailored to the specific story. And then each point of view character has a perspective that can add a layer of flavor to the story's narrative, because in a close third, that narrative voice is going to align with the character, especially anytime there's a sense of interiority. Anytime there's an emotional experience, we're dealing with that psychic closeness of
Mm-hmm.
narrator to point of view character. Now, if you're doing multiple first person point of view narratives, then you need to make every character's voice distinct.
Mm-hmm.
We should know from the narrative, from the description of the scene out the window, from the type of language used, the syntax, whether or not there's an element of like regional dialect or something. We should know whose narrative head we are in, right? Who is our storyteller? So it's not enough to just develop an individual character with some personality and a speaking voice. We need a whole unique person times however many point of view characters you have. And that needs to be clear
Mm-hmm.
on every single page that belongs to that character. So you're creating for yourself a big challenge, right?
Yeah.
And it can be a ton of fun, but you know, do it well or don't bother. go, go back to your journals, to your studies, practice, write, grow until you can really knock that out. Right.
Yeah. And it did throw me, initially because I'm so used to when you have multiple point of views, I just sort of thought it was like knee jerk, you're in third person, like there's not an option. And it feels like more and more authors are willing to go there and trust the reader to figure it out. In some ways, I mean, they have to do it well. And this one was done well, but it was like
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't expecting it, to see that chapter change. Oh yeah, Poisonwood Bible. Yep.
Poisonwood Vibes is my favorite. I talk about it so much and I held back. I was like, okay, they've heard about that book on the podcast umpteen times. Yes, Kristen, absolutely. Um, yeah, I love the Poisonwood Bible. It is a masterful handling of first person point of view narrative. Yeah. And I was going to say
Mhm.
something to what you were saying, Catherine, and then I saw Poisonwood Bible and got
No, it's
very,
all good. Well, I feel
very
like
excited there.
we've interviewed a number of authors on the podcast lately who have had first person characters, right, across a series, and then they'll opt to have like one book that has a multiple point of view, and some of them have opted to switch POVs partway through the book. And I think that's an interesting, it's like an evolution of trusting your reader to be able to make that narrative switch and the voice. And like you said, it's so much harder. You're just adding a layer of
Hmm.
complexity on top. Oh,
Yeah, well, if you think about what goes into developing your characters, and you've got your point of view character right there at the pinnacle of your character pyramid. I say they wear the crown and make sure they deserve that crown before you give a character a point of view. And so any character with a point of view needs much more development and understanding and deep work. And, you're getting into the psyche, the motivation, the history, that stuff that doesn't even make it to the page as backstory. And as we go drop out of that point of view and go down the tiers of supporting characters, we need to do less work to distinguish them, right?
hmm
And so if you've got multiple point of view characters in your story, you're just, you know, however much work you do for one point of view character, multiply that by every point of view character, because even if they don't have the same quantity of pages dedicated to their perspective, you need to understand them at that level. You need to still know them as a whole person to create that distinct voice. I know what I was going to say. So over the years, I've had a lot of writers come to me and say, okay, I'm writing this story and I've got this point of view and that point of view, and this is in first person. And then I switch to third person because that's a supporting character. And then I do this and then I do that, blah, 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 blah. And when writing your book is the sandbox you're playing in, that's awesome. Like, have fun, do whatever you want. But when you start preparing, you're writing a book, you want to put it in the hands of readers, you want it to go out into the world, then you've got to start asking yourself why. So my question to writers is, okay, that's fine. You want to do that. And if your only reason to do it is that it's an artistic challenge for you and you want to take it on, I'm all for it. Totally. But when you think about the demands of your story, your plot, your protagonist's arc, every character's relationship to that protagonist, how many protagonists can you have? Are you giving points of view to a bunch of supporting characters, or do you have multiple protagonists? And if you do, right, how are you handling their growth and development, their climaxes, their resolutions, all of these elements? And are you going to have readers equally invested in every point of view character? Can you manage that? Or are they going to start saying, well, I don't care about this one. That one is so-so. Are they going to get confused? What is best for your story? And typically they start saying, okay, nope, I'm going to deselect the point of view shifts, or I'm going to deselect a couple of these characters and put them back into a different rank
Hmm.
in their story. And it's not about right or wrong. I can tell you to do lots of things this way or that way, but at the end of the day, it's about the demands the story makes on us and what is the most effective, meaningful way to tell the story you want to tell.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that was all the questions I brought prepared. So if anybody has anything else in the comments, feel free to just, and if you want to let us know, I'm typing. Um, we can watch for
Yeah,
it.
we can chat while you type.
Yes, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, I love talking about things like this where it's like you said, no right or wrong, because it's so fun to be able to say, okay, what do I need to learn? Where do I need to grow to be able to take on this challenge or that challenge? And then is it appropriate for my story? And those are fun questions to ask. So
Definitely. Yes, I have fun answering them. Yay.
always good. All right.
So what do we have coming up in 2026, Catherine?
What do we have upcoming in 2020?
Well,
You know,
I
we
know,
have a
I
bunch
know
of
we have
really great
writing
interviews that are coming
workshops.
out. Yeah, we have a bunch of really great
Yeah.
interviews coming out on the podcast. So watch for those. Got winter workshops coming up, what, February and March? And then you
Mm-hmm.
have the big one, the retreat weekend thing that you're planning for memory emotion. I can always get that one wrong.
Yes. Yeah. So memory, emotion, body is a workshop I've taught a handful of times in the past, which is a great, intimate experience, right? It never, like the recordings never go public for after sale. So whoever you're in the room with, those are the only people who ever get to know what you say or what you share in that group. And it's all about accessing our memories, our emotions, and our bodies, our reservoir of experience that we then bring to our writing. And so if anyone has an experience you feel you need to write about, but it's hard, it's a struggle to write about it, or you aren't sure how to translate that experience to words which will communicate that experience to somebody else, that's what this workshop is all about. And so this year I decided to do it a little differently instead of meeting, you know, for so many hours here and there. It's going to be a weekend immersive retreat, so kind of a staycation over Zoom, but we'll come together, discuss, share, then go away and have time to write and process and reflect, and then come back, have some more learning, some more sharing and discussion, go away and write. So kind of a Friday evening to Sunday afternoon um, retreat experience, but at home over Zoom. So yes, both. Yeah. So as you may know, I have some essays. I've got one about pregnancy loss, one about my father's death. Um, my pregnancy loss experience, I tried to write it as kind of a nonfiction piece, scrapped that years and years ago, then gave that experience to a character in my novel, A Stone's Throw. Then it finally came out as this essay, which is a notable in Best American Essays. And so our experiences are our wellspring of material. So whether you want to write fiction or memoir or personal essay, short story, it's narrative craft, but this is about the process and the space and the community for getting at those things that we carry inside of us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep.
Awesome.
So any other comments or questions? I feel like we might have missed one, but now I can't scroll.
Susan said she started The Loneliness of Sonia and Sunny, which looks fabulous. So,
Mhm.
the Memory Emotion Body is in April, correct? Do you have the dates in front of you?
Yes, maybe. And now it's so if you go to wordessential.com/workshops, you'll find the details there. So it is April 24, 25, and 26. And I don't have like the hours of the stuff down, but basically it's that weekend you'd want to block off. Um, and I'm in the central time zone too. So we'll have kind of a, you know, briefer call Friday evening and then Saturday and Sunday morning to do the retreat together.
Mhm.
So there we go.
Awesome.
All right. Cool. Well, thank you everybody for showing up, and thank you, Catherine, for bringing the questions. Always appreciate it.
And we'll be
All right.
back again first week of February, first Monday in
That's
February.
right. First Monday. Hmm.
Awesome.
All right. Bye, everyone.